Hi, welcome to the Oliver Fetter YouTube channel. Today I'm getting into the real nuts and bolts of my TDI into Mark I Volkswagen engine swap, where I was swapping from a 1.6 turbo diesel to the 1.9 ALH turbo diesel. To give some context, the motor is already in the car. It's sitting there, it has the oil system connected and nothing else. So I'm getting into the real nitty gritty of like, how the shit do I actually make it turn on and work? Mainly in cooling system components and some miscellaneous things like throttle cables, hoses, etc. Sure, let's take a look. This is where I'm at right now. I got my fuel lines plumbed approximately where I want them to go. The car turns on and runs. There's no intercooler piping done. My oil cooler is run and connected, and I think that's a good spot for it, and I made mounts for it that are actually welded to the car. So then that kind of leaves the last big thing to actually be able to turn this motor on and let it warm up and break in, which is the cooling system. And this is the inlet to the motor, that's the outlet to the motor. A little different than the 1.6. The 1.6 outlet was about there. Inlet was in a similar place, so it's a little tricky and it's a little tight on space with this oil filter housing. So the thing I'm working on right now is building up my radiating stack to see if it's going to fit here. And then the other huge thing that I ran into the other week is this right here is the correct throttle cable for the 1.6. And as you can see, it just doesn't reach, not even a chance. So this right here is actually a 1.8 liter left-hand drive throttle cable or something like that, and it's the longest VW throttle cable you can get basically from the factory. And we're gonna see if it'll work. I had to order it from England, but it looks like it's got lots of length to actually reach. It's just a matter of routing it and then addressing the fact that this end is wrong. So what we got going on so far, I figured out that you can take the 1.6 liter upper coolant pipe, which normally does something like this, and you can trim the ends off it a bit, and it just so happens to work out well to be the ALH return pipe because the outlet of the radiator is down here and the inlet of the motor is about there, and that works. But now I have absolutely nothing to get me from about here to there, so that's really just going to require some measuring and like going to AutoZone and hoping they have a tube that fits, I think. First things first though, I got to make this radiator fit, because if it doesn't fit and the fans don't go on it, everything else is silly. The other thing I'm doing at this time is I'm actually putting bigger fans on it. So if we take these off, these are new. This was the shroud I've made previously for the Mark I radiator. I use a 2-row aluminum radiator, but it's still the Mark I diesel size and spec. And these were my old fans that I just took off. And you can see that they didn't really, I mean, they definitely pulled air and there was a shroud, so they were pulling air through everything, but you can see they weren't really like using the space they could have as well as they could have. So I went with these bad boys, which are way bigger. If we just appreciate the size difference for a second. And even in just like the volume of air it's going to be able to move is crazy more. I mean, I think these things are about an inch bigger in radius the whole way around. And that's going to do a lot in terms of just moving more air and cooling my car more effectively, which is the reason for this particular upgrade. For those who care, this new fan is about 10.5 inches across, and the old one was 8, so we picked up 2.5 inches worth of diameter across both fans, which is going to be huge. So I'm currently working on, I just scored a line where I need to trim the shroud for the new fans to fit, and they are just barely going to fit in here. And I already did a quick dry check in the car. The ALH like oil tower comes up like right here, and there's like a rib on it, and if I move the fans to the furthest edge this way, which is how they're laid out right now, then that rib falls right about here, and I actually should have enough clearance with the radiator pushed as far forward as I can lean it. That's the hope. So, got everything marked. These can come off. And so the black line is the outline of the fan. These dots are my places I need to drill holes. However, this score mark that may or may not show up on camera is what I etched with a screwdriver. That is actually the inside radius. Inside, it's not a radius, but the inside curvature of one of these fans. It's like this line. So that's what I'm going to be shooting for when I go to cut this. Just another quick comparison of the size difference. I'm expecting this to actually make a big difference in terms of how much heat I can dissipate and how quickly. Okay, so now I'm in pretty good shape, aside from the fact that I have no hardware to put this together with. So I'm probably going to go get some of that. Unless I just so happen to have 8 of the perfect size fastener with matching nuts down here. Nope. It's worth looking, but no. So, this is what I used last time, and I went all the way through the radiator core. I don't think that's necessary or useful. Basically, I did fan, cover, spacer, and then radiator core, and that does hold it all together super well. I just don't think it's necessary, because once I bolt these fans to this flimsy aluminum, then the aluminum is going to be reinforced by these fans. So the fans can honestly kind of be the structure of this setup. So that would bring us to the second part of the conundrum that needs solved, which is radiator fit. And kind of more importantly than that, I'm gonna be running it all the way forward. Basically, that's touching the back of my intercooler is what that's doing. And so this is what I was saying with this hose cut like so. That actually fits real nice down here and onto that elbow. So I have that taken care of, but I gotta make it from here to there, which isn't trivial per se. Measuring tape. Probably the best routing is to come out, snake between here, kind of under my fuel pump and over. So more than anything, what I want to do is just measure approximates. So it needs to come over about 11.5 inches, and it needs to come out about 11.5 inches. There you go. So I need a hose that diagonally traverses an engine bay space and is about 11.5 by 11.5 in the space it covers. And then it also needs to be a 1.25 inch ID hose. That's what the VW hoses are, as far as I can tell. It's like 1.25. So the hose will go approximately like that. I can go to the auto parts store and see if I can find that just somewhere on their shelf, and go to the hardware store and get that hardware, and then come back and see if we can assemble a useful cooling system. So that would leave the only other thing to iron out being the reservoir, which I have here. Currently this is connected to absolutely nothing. That means we need a run of hose of this diameter, which is like, I don't know, 1/8 inch or something, 1/4 inch ID hose. that goes from our radiator overflow back to here, and we also need a hose that goes from the head steam port, which is right here, same size, back to our upper coolant bottle hose. And I'm thinking the coolant bottle will live somewhere up here, like maybe about there. And I can run this hose into, with the coupler I already have, into this heater adapter from the 1.6. Let me show you. So this metal pipe right here, that's ALH parts. This right here is actually the coolant, like fill slash return slash feed to the pump from the 1.6, which actually necks from the ALH size down to the tube size that I will be feeding with, actually quite nicely. And then this will just need shortened, obviously, to get it to sit up here nice. That's the thought. Okay, I'm back. That was a good errand session, very successful. In case you're wondering, AutoZone has what you need. If you ever need a random hose, they have so many molded hoses that you just measure what you need and walk back there, and seems like almost certainly you'll find it. So the only thing I don't love currently is that it kind of is hitting on this stupid rib on this filter housing, which I could just grind off. But in case you were wondering, get it off. Come on. Okay. In case you were wondering and you just wanted to go pick up a hose that works for a TDI swapped into a Mark 1 radiator situation, again, reuse your original upper radiator hose as your new lower, and then go buy one of these. It's a Duralast 62671. That's what it looks like on the tag. This thing works perfectly as the upper hose, which is awesome. So now I have my hoses sorted. I just got to run the other parts of my cooling system, which is going to take a hot second because I'm going to change up my layout a bit. But super stoked that it's going together somewhat nicely and this isn't too janky. And back over yonder, I have 8 of the hardware I need to make this work. And this side is for hose. So that goes like that. This goes like that. And I just need to bolt them up, which will take a minute. There we go. Look at that. That's actually, I don't know if I would say I'm proud of that, but I'm excited that this looks like it's about to put in work, honestly. That's like basically the entire area of my radiator covered in fans, which is amazing. Hopefully that gets, and it's actually like, you saw how flimsy it was when I was cutting it. It's actually pretty stiff now that the fans are bolted onto it. And this is good because it means I can probably get away with slipping this whole shooting match in the engine bay separate from the radiator, because it seemed like it really didn't want to go in there with the radiator because of how close that oil filter is. But this should give you some ideas. On the internet, I've seen people debating whether or not, the 1.6 radiator is big enough or to get a bigger one. And I'll just pose this. You could get a bigger radiator, or you could just put bigger fans on the radiator you have and move more air through it. That's what I'm gonna try. So we'll see how that works out. So this is what the full package looks like. So you can see I've covered basically the whole radiator in fans this time around, which I'm super stoked on. That's gonna help me keep the car cool for sure. And that's pretty much what a modern radiator looks like anyways. You would never see a new car that has a fan way smaller than the size of its radiator. Every new car has like at least one gigantic one that's like edge to edge and then a smaller one next to it or something like that. So this is just about ready to go in, other than I have to get my wiring sorted. Doesn't really help you have a radiator if fans don't turn on, and the fans aren't going to turn on without this bit either that I just swapped. So I think I'll get this fully situated in the car, then put my hoses on, then screw around with my coolant overflow bottle, and then hopefully can actually start and run the car and let it warm up for the first time. So to wire these up, I have these 3-pin connectors I'm going to use because it'll be a nice clip and plug kind of situation, and it works out nicely because I have what's going to be power and ground from the car's usual chassis, and then I also have a switch that I can control a radiator fan with, which just so happens to be a blue wire in the car, so this is perfect. So it'll be power and ground and then power from my other switch. And on this end, I'm going to just wire these two together because it doesn't matter which one power ends up coming from. And on the fan side of things, we got 2 fans, so it'll be 2 fan grounds coming together to 1 ground here, and 2 fan power wires coming together, 2 different power feed options here. That's what's going on. There you go, we went from this to this. Much nicer. Install the radiator first, which actually I need to check one more thing, which is the thermostat wires probably don't reach. That's gonna go all the way in. I have yet to figure out exactly how I'm holding it here, but oh, so close, but so not close at the same time. So these wires need addressed too. We try to wrangle this beast into place, and you'll see what I mean about the clearance not being great. Give me what I seek. Okay. See if we can just sneak this in here. Very cozy. Very, very cozy. But it fits right there. And you can see there's basically no clearance between it and the motor, which isn't quite what I want, but I think I can get a little if I end up shoving the radiator even a little further in. Alrighty, and as a test fire, if I turn my switch on, nice. That's great. We love it. So that's what finished hoses look like. Not bad. I was kind of worried that upper hose would look really bad when I put it in, but it's okay. That's where I took off some material. New idea. This no longer goes over here because I just want it to be fuel system over here. This is my radiator vent, basically. I already connected it at this end, and I'm going to run it up all the way around through my rain tray to here. And that is where I think I'm going to mount my coolant tank. Still a little torn if I want to put it up here or not, but I feel like that's just a bit janky. It seems a little janky to me to run it right there. Alrighty, so this is mostly finished product here. We have our steam hose, have our regular feed, and then the kind of radiator steam hose goes up and around, up through here, and tees in. So we basically have the 2 like air hoses that feed into the top as the return, and then this big bottom one is our feed down to the water pump. Okay, so this is what we have going on with the cable. It's pretty long. It's quite long, actually. This is how long it is. It's probably like 6 inches longer than the last cable I was using, but that's okay. And the end is wrong. So, thinking about some new ways to do this. And honestly, I think the easiest thing, and maybe the best, because my first idea was to like cut and weld the factory end of the cable off and put it on that one somehow, but I think that's a bad idea because I don't know if that's going to be successful or not. So my next idea is to just clamp what we have, which should be doable. I think we can just clamp what I have in here. Because it's basically a cable clamp anyways. All right, and that looks pretty good. So I just turned this plate into a clamp, much like a mountain bike cable, and you know, at full throttle, it's going to be pulling a slightly different way than it is when it's down here, but I don't see that being a problem. Go try it out. All right, and I completely spaced buying coolant, so I think this is concentrate, and this one's a full one that says ready to use. So we'll start with that. If I had to guess, this cooling system is probably going to need at least 2 gallons. And we'll find out how good of a job I did with everything. I'm trying to think if there's any reason not to fill it. No, I guess not. So, we're about to see how good of a job we did sealing everything. And so naturally, if you fill it this way where you're feeding into the water pump, it gets to a point where it stops taking coolant, even though the system is nowhere near full. So, my favorite on these is to just dump it directly into the head, and by this method, it should be full. Yeah, when you start to see the fluid in the pipe and or it starts to spill out your radiator hose. So that was a whole gallon. I'm gonna add some water to this because I'm pretty sure it's concentrate. I usually mark when it's not. Let's just verify. Yeah, that's concentrate. You can just tell by how it pours. I mean, glycol by itself pours like syrup, and when you add water to it, it pours like water. And I find you kind of want to check your hoses on a new motor and squeeze them. And you can feel where the coolant is and where there's still just air. Here we go. We have my naturally aspirated turbo diesel. It's kind of nice just with an air filter on like that. There's not all that bullshit in the way. And so now we can fire it up. And this thing basically fires immediately, and this is my bail switch. It used to be easy to fire with the screwdriver. Now it's too long because the radiator's in the way, so we'll use my socket. Oil pressure is good. Okay, definitely interesting. Definitely not quite sure. Not used to any of this yet. And just in case, screw that air filter, I'm gonna have this nearby in case this thing decides to boogie, but it just seemed like the fuel pump was getting settled more than anything. So try that again. I just decreased idle speed. Don't love how that's acting. I have the kill switch right here. Let's go. Oh, yes. Oh my god. The amount of diesel I just breathed in, unreal. I should have just set up a fan, but I was too committed to breaking it in. Well, now that I've officially come down from my diesel inhalation high, that was awesome. It sounds good. For a minute there, right when I started it, I was kind of tweaking because the intake noise sounds like rod knock and the injector noise sounds like valve train, but after running it for the full 20 whatever minutes that was to get it up to temperature, I think it's totally good to go. Which is exciting. Seems like it probably needs just a little bit more bass timing. It's running really smooth down low, but as soon as you start getting it up there, it'll miss now and then. And now it's just on to finishing a few more things. I mean, the big work is done, getting my cooling system figured out and the bigger fans on and all the tubing sorted was a big push today. I got my oil cooler on and sorted. It's not wired in yet. I need to do that still, but did that the other day. Also a big chunk of the work that needed done. So now it's a matter of just tidying things up. We need axles in here. We need a few more wires connected. We need the Arduino hooked up. All very exciting stuff, but So that was my initial break-in. Actual ring seating takes about 500 to 1,000 miles, but out of precaution, I think it's a good idea to run the motor, and again, I was keeping it off idle as much as possible. Run the motor until it gets hot the first time, keep it there for a minute, make sure there's no coolant leaks or any other weirdness going on, and then shut it off and let it fully cool and change your oil and filter, which is definitely what I'm going to do. Just going to play it safe. Theoretically, on most rebuilds, you would take them up to 500 miles before you change the oil, but I just put too much effort into this one. But this is awesome. I mean, it runs. We have a throttle cable. The fans turn on when they need to. They fit. I'm so stoked. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out.